Welcome back to the QuickShow tutorial, Chapter 7 on Quick Targets. Quick Targets is a way that you can take your laser projector and use the scanners in the laser projector, which normally scan onto a projection screen or scan directly into the audience or above the audience's head, and use that laser projector or scanners to target mirrors or mirror balls or diffraction gratings or other things that you would want to point a laser beam to for dramatic effect. QuickShow has a built-in system to help you to do that and to get it set up once so that you can make effective use of that over and over again very easily. The Quick Targets feature is normally found down here in the Quick Tools area. You'll notice that I don't have a tab right now that says Quick Targets, and that's because QuickShow will not show you the Quick Targets feature until you've demonstrated to QuickShow that you know what Quick Targets are and you know the benefits of them and the potential hazards associated with Quick Targets. In order to use Quick Targets and for it to show up in the Quick Tools, come up here to the Settings menu and then come over here to this menu item that says Quick Targets Beam Settings. The very first time that you go to this Quick Targets Beam Settings area, you'll notice this note here that talks about the Quick Targets, what they're used for, and the possible hazards associated with them. One of the hazards is that when you're using a Quick Targets beam system, you have the capability of putting out nearly the laser's full power into a single beam. Obviously, that could be pretty hazardous. If that beam was to stay on a dark piece of cloth and your laser is sufficiently high power, it could be that it will catch that cloth on fire. Also, obviously, if you have the Quick Targets projecting into an area that's normally occupied by the audience, you have the capability of putting a full power beam potentially into an audience area. So there are hazards associated with this, and you have to read this and agree that you understand what the hazards are before QuickShow will even show you this feature. If you're not using QuickShow for targeting mirrors or mirror balls or diffraction gratings, if you're only going to be using QuickShow for graphic application, we would recommend that you not use this area of the program. So, since this chapter is on using the Quick Targets feature of the program, what I'm going to do is go ahead and enable it. You check on this box, and then you'll come to the Quick Targets Beam Settings window, which allows you to actually see what this feature is. Also checking that box will enable the Quick Targets feature down here in the Quick Tools area. Now, QuickShow, in addition to having the Quick Targets system deactivated by default and requiring you to check on a checkbox, indicate that you know what the Quick Targets feature is and know how to use it, QuickShow also has another layer of safety built into it, and that is that just because you agree that you understand what Quick Targets are and the hazards associated with it doesn't mean that QuickShow will actually enable all of the beams and all of the locations at once. Instead, each one of these beams is disabled by default, and you have to enable it and then adjust its position one by one. QuickShow allows for 32 separate beam positions to be projected, possibly all at the same time, but normally that would not be the case. And also, more typically, if you have mirrors that you're targeting, in a typical situation, you will not have 32 separate beam positions or 32 separate mirror balls and so forth. It could be that you have only 4 or 5 or 8 of them. And so because of that, as an added layer of safety, QuickShow will require you to turn on the beams one by one, set their position, and it will keep the beams that you're not using deactivated. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and activate a beam, for example, you'll notice that each one of these beam positions here, each one of the little boxes with a red X around it, is a beam position. And if you click down here in the list, what you'll see is that you could select each beam separately. What you need to do is activate the target beam, which will remove the X. And then what we could do is we can actually turn that beam on by clicking on the little box area over here, which will turn it into a green check mark. If we want to enable that on the laser, we could say show it now. Now all of this must be done very carefully. For example, if you're doing this in a club, you would want to do it during a time that the club is unoccupied. Of course, you would also want to announce that the laser is coming on and that people should stay away from the projected area. And that's because when you activate a beam position, it will put a beam out there, and you just want to make sure that nobody is going to be in the way of that beam when it comes on. So when we have the Enable Laser Output button pressed, as it is now, when you click on a beam like this, it will enable that beam. We could start to see it on the camera over there. And at this point, what you could do is click in the area and drag this into place. QuickShow allows you to just drag this around using the mouse, and even though the mouse doesn't sound like a high precision device, because of the way we've implemented the beam system in QuickShow, it actually winds up to be very high resolution. If you need higher resolution, you can use this area down here, and you could either type in coordinates directly, like that, or what you could do is use the spinner control here for very precise motion and very precise control. But the mouse typically does allow for very good control over these beam positions. And so what you do is basically turn a beam position on, move this to it where it gets into the center of a mirror. I don't have mirrors set up for this video, but it's just projecting onto a wall so that you could see that there's a beam there, and we move it around. And QuickShow allows you to enable multiple beams at the same time so that you could see the beams in relation to one another. For example, if I click on this beam number 2 and then activate it and turn it on, what we could see is that I can now drag this one, and both of those beams will be projecting at the same time. Now, as yet another layer of safety, QuickShow allows you to control the relative power of each one of these beam positions separately. And that relative power is controlled by this slider down here. For example, you'll notice that by default, the relative power of all of these beams is set to 10%. So that means that even when you do enable the laser output, you won't really be putting out the full beam's power at this point in time. If you want the full beam's power to come out, what you'll have to do is adjust this relative power slider all the way to the right. And as you can see on the video, as I move this to the right, the beam gets brighter. Now, since we're projecting onto a wall, I don't want to do this because even though it's a white wall, it's got gray vinyl covering on it. And so I know just by using this laser and trying this in the past that if I turn this up to 100%, it'll actually burn the wall. So I'm going to leave these down for now. And in fact, when setting up your beam positions, what we would recommend is that you leave this down at 10% or so. Basically what you want to do is use the lowest power possible while you're aligning the laser. So you basically will move these things around, target your mirror that you want. Once this is exactly the way you want, targeting the mirror you have and definitely on there with no hazards, then you can go about moving the relative power slider higher before finally clicking OK. Now there's two notes that I want to make here, and that is that once we've set up the quick targets beam settings over here, and enabled a couple of beam positions, that the quick targets feature of the program, which allows you to turn on and off beams while you're doing your live performance and also make beam sequences. One of the things you'll notice is that you have these little red no signs here, and they are set up because we only set up beams number 1 and 2, and so QuickShow's only going to let us set up and activate beams number 1 and 2 in our beam sequences. And even when we come down here to a predefined sequence of predefined cues that have lots of different things, like for example this one here has 16 different beam sequences. If I drag and drop this down to the quick targets, what we'll see is that it will only allow us to even see the first few of these, because these are the 2 we set up. So that's the first point that I want to make about the quick targets beam settings, and that's done for safety, because let's say you got a workspace from a friend of yours who had all 32 beam positions defined, but you only have 8 beam positions. What you wouldn't want to have happen is beam positions 9 through 32 to be going into areas that you didn't even set up yet. So that's why QuickShow does that as a safety precaution. The second thing is that by default, each one of these beam positions are set up to go to zone 30, which is the zone that QuickShow defines as the QuickShow targeted beams zone. Now, that uses the projection zones feature of QuickShow that was mentioned a little bit earlier in this tutorial. And so, for example, if you go to settings and projection zones, here's the projection zones dialog box. We could set up our geometric correction and how they appear on the preview window in each one of these things. But for the purpose of this discussion in this tutorial, we should focus on this one here, Zone 30 Quick Targets Beams. What we can do is put up a grid pattern there and then adjust the geometric correction so that the area that we're projecting for this zone only covers approximately what we need to for the mirrors. So let's say our mirrors are pretty much at the top of the projection area. What we can do is adjust the size and the position of this projection zone so that we're really only scanning around our mirrors and not even able to scan lower or higher. This is another thing that helps to promote safety. So again, there's a lot of layers of safety built into here. As a user, you should take advantage of all of these layers, and this will help to make sure that nothing will go wrong. So we have the projection zones set up here. What I've done is I've changed the size and the position of this area so that it's only going to be projecting around where I have mirrors. Of course, I'm projecting onto a wall now, so you'll just have to use your imagination and pretend that there are mirrors up there. In a lot of clubs, they have mirrors associated with a pretty high area and not so much a low area or on the left or the right. And so by compressing the size like this and adjusting the Y size to be very narrow, like I say, it just kind of is another layer of safety. Ideally, this should be done before you go into the Quick Targets beam settings. So that way you can restrict it to only the mirror area. And there's another benefit to that, which is that as you're moving this around, what you'll notice now is that even though I'm moving this way down here, since I've told my projection zone that it's really a compressed area in the upper region of my projection area, this gives me the highest resolution, and it just provides for the easiest way to target those mirrors. So let's use the example of setting up 8 separate mirror locations. So let's say my mirror number 1 is there, and mirror number 2 is maybe there. I'll turn on beam number 3, activate that. Go ahead and turn that on, and beam number 3 is here. We have a green square drawn around the activated item. So we'll move that into position. Let's say that's a little bit further on the screen like that. turn beam 2 back on just so we can see that. Beam 4, we'll go ahead and activate that, turn it on, and then move that into position. Once we're in this Quick Targets Beam Settings window, you can enable the laser output and then enable these beams one at a time, move them around, turn on as many as you want while you're doing the alignment, and then just before you leave here, once all of the beams are really targeting mirrors and targeting locations, you could select each one and then increase the relative power. You do this after they are aligned properly with the mirrors, and once everything is in a safe situation. You always would use the lowest power during the alignment procedure, and then once everything is aligned, you can increase the power. So since I don't have any mirrors here, since this is just a demonstration, I'm going to leave the relative power down all the way on all of these beam positions. But you should just know that this controls the system from this point forward. So while the relative power is down, it means that any time that the Quick Targets feature is used, it will use this relative power level. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Once we have all of our beam positions set up, you'll notice that this area here no longer has we basically have beams number 1 through 8 available to us to use, because those are the beams that we set up. The rest of the beams are not available anymore because we haven't set these things up yet. So once the Quick Targets Beams settings is actually set up, we can use this area of the program here, Quick Targets, to actually output beams to the system. For example, what we can do is go ahead and say show it now, and then we could say we want red beams, and then click on beam number 1 here, and that will output a red beam at beam position number 1. If we just want a single beam like this, what we can do is just simply drag and drop this to a queue like this. So anytime we want to output something, we just click on it and immediately we get that beam. Let's say we wanted to set the X up here to be a yellow beam number 2. We just choose the color yellow, click on 2, and that's it. We could say show it now, or just drag and drop that to a queue. So anytime we click on that, we'll get a yellow beam number 2. To create a sequence, it's similar. For example, what I'll do is I'll just clear this out. Sure, I'll clear out the sequence. And now let's say we want to create a 4-step sequence that goes beams number 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of them being white in this case. So we can click on beam number 1 as step number 1, and then we'll click up here to add a step and go beam number 2 will be step number 2. We'll click here to add a step. Beam number 3 at step number 3. We'll add another step. And then beam number 4 at step number 4. So what we could do is press this play button here, and you could see in the little preview window what's going to happen. And this is stepping once per beat, because this little icon is selected here, which means use the beat, and this is the beat system up here. And so if we wanted to go faster to the beat of the music, all we would have to do is tap the space bar faster. So now it's picking up the faster beat. If we show it now, we could see that on the laser, see what that looks like. And if we'd like that, we could just simply drag and drop that to a queue. QuickShow already has a number of built-in beam settings and beam sequences here on the targets page within the atmospherics category. The top line here has the first 8 beams, and they're just single beam positions. So if you click it, it will enable a beam number 1, beam number 2, beam number 3, and so forth. These particular ones do not sequence here. The next row down does have some beam sequences built in. For example, this first cue says sequence 1 through 4. If I click on it, it will just step beams 1 through 4. This next one is sequence 1 through 8. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and you can see what that is. And again, all of this is going directly to the beat of the music, and so if the music slows down, all you have to do is tap the space bar to the slower beat of the music. QuickShow will pick up that beat and automatically slow down that beam sequence. The next few here have a couple of different beams on. These has 2 beams on at a time. This has kind of a crossing sequence here. We've got a couple of colorized sequences built into the system. A little bit of a randomized color here. And just like everything else in QuickShow, the way you edit these, if you don't like this color sequence, or if you want to add more beams to it, or have more of them on at the same time, all we need to do is drag and drop this down to the Quick Targets area, and you see the black flashing arrows. It means that this is the tool that should be used to edit this. So we'll just drop it on there, and it automatically loads this beam sequence into the Quick Targets sequencer. So now we can edit this. Let's say, for example, the very first step, I want all of the beams to be on, and I want them to all be white. And then in step number 4, let's say I want all of the beams to be on, and at step number 4 and be yellow, like this. So if we play this now, we can see how this is going to work. I'll just show it now. So you can see that the step number 1 is all white, and step number 4 is all yellow. Clicking on the stop key will stop the sequence from going, and then you can click on each one of these steps to see what the beams are going to look like at that step. And as you can see here, you've got the scroll bar here so you can access the different steps. At step number 9 here, none of the beams are on. And once we've edited this, if we get it looking the way we want, we can drag and drop it back to the same cue or to a different cue, and any time we want to access it, all we have to do is click on it. So this is the Quick Targets feature. Once again, you have to enable the Quick Targets by accessing this dialog box and indicating that you know how to use it. You have to enable each beam separately with the Activate Target Beam position. You can show all of them in relation to one another, or just show one beam at a time using these checkboxes. Control the relative power of each beam separately, doing so very carefully and only once you've gotten the target you want. You can control the destination here. Normally this is going to zone number 30, but you can send it to other zones if you want to. For example, we have a couple of mirror ball zones predefined in QuickShow, zones 15 through 19. If you have a mirror ball, you might want to use beam position, let's say 16, put that on mirror ball 1, and so forth. So that's how you control that. You can set up the projection zones to access and project only in the particular area that you want, thereby increasing safety even more. And once that's all set up, come down here to Quick Targets to make either single beam positions or complete beam sequences.